Hello, this is George Hutton, and you are listening to the Mind Persuasion podcast. Today we continue our study of the Milton model, otherwise known as Covert and Conversational Hypnosis. Today's first pattern is called double binds. This basically entails giving your listener two choices. Both lead to your outcome. Let's say you are giving a sales presentation to a potential customer and it's time to ask for the sale. What do you say? You could say something like, "So, what do you think?" To which they could reply, let me think about it for a while. Or you could say something like, "Would you like to buy my product?" To which they could reply, I'd like to talk it over with my wife. Or you could use a double bind and say, "Which would you prefer, option A with XYZ features and benefits and a 6-month payment plan? Or option B with CDE features and benefits and a 12-month payment plan?" You give them the illusion of choice, both of which lead to your outcome, namely making the sale. Salespeople who make in-home sales calls know very well that people hate nothing more than a pesky salesperson coming to their house at night trying to sell them something when all they'd really like to do is have a couple and watch TV. So when setting appointments, they frequently use this pattern in the form of, "So you've sent us a response postcard asking for some more information. I'd like to come visit you and show you more about our product. Which is better for you, next Thursday at 8 p.m. or next Wednesday at 6:30? This way you are giving them a choice, but either choice leads to your outcome, visiting them in their home and getting the opportunity to give a sales presentation. The more rapport you have, the better this will work. If you try and close too soon, it won't be very effective. If you've given a great presentation and your product really does meet the customer's needs, then choosing between A or B will be the logical outcome. You can use this in a variety of situations. If you want to ask your significant other or spouse to go out to dinner, for example, instead of staying home, you could say, "Do you want to go to that Italian place tonight, or would you rather go to that Mexican place you like so much?" Or if you have a good idea they'll say yes to going out to eat, you could say, "Do you want to go to that Italian place over on 6th, or do you want to go to Luigi's downtown?" You could even use this to ask somebody out on a date after you've gotten their phone number. "Hi, this is George from the other night. Would you like to have dinner with me on Friday, or would you rather get together for a cup of coffee on Thursday afternoon?" Another way to frame this is to make one choice more expensive or more difficult or less likely to be chosen and make the other choice a lot easier, like the previous date example. Social research, particularly that done by Dr. Robert Cialdini, indicates that when presented with two side-by-side choices, the cheaper choice appears much cheaper when placed next to a more expensive product. In the example above, if the girl wasn't that into you, she might not say yes if you only asked her to dinner. But given a choice between dinner and a half-hour cup of coffee, she would be much more likely to agree to the coffee date when compared to the dinner date, even more so than if you only asked her to go out to coffee with you. If you are making a request for an in-home sales call, you could use this technique and say, "I'd like to come over to your house to give you some more information you requested on our product. It will take about 2 hours. Is next Thursday better at 8 p.m.? Or we could do it on Wednesday at 6, but on Wednesday at 6 I'm pretty busy, so I could only meet for about 20 minutes. Which is better for you?" They'll almost always go for Wednesday at 6. Just be sure you only take 20 minutes. Our next pattern is called the Conversational Postulate. This is very useful, and it's something most people do anyways. It's something that you can do to ask people to do something without making anybody feel on the spot, and it allows everybody to save face. It's sometimes called a softener. It basically involves a command and turns it into a question. For example, the command, "Close the door," sounds pretty abrupt. It sounds like you think you are some dictator and whoever you are speaking to has no choice but to obey your commands. This might work if you are a parent talking to a child, but it doesn't do very well for rapport if one adult says it to another, especially if there's other people around. A way to make it softer is to put "can you" in front of it so it becomes "can you close the door?" Basic pattern is to add "can you" before the command phrase. "Can you pass me the salt? Can you turn down the radio? Can you open the window? Can you help me with my homework?" You can also use this by starting off with "do you" and then mention an object plus an action you'd like them to perform. If you are in sales, do you have a pen to sign this contract with? Do you have your driver's license with you so that I can start filling out the sales contract? If you are a boss, do you have time to finish this report by 6 tonight? Do you have some ideas to bring to the meeting this afternoon on how to increase sales? If you are at a bar with your friends, Do you have enough money to buy me a drink? Do you have a pen to write down your phone number for me? Do you have your car key since you are the designated driver for tonight? Another way you can use this is to introduce a new idea starting off with a can you phrase. Can you believe how easy it is to persuade people using the Milton model? Can you believe how simple it is to use these patterns to become incredibly popular? Can you imagine all the cool things you can do once you've made the Milton model second nature and are using it in all conversations? Or you can use the do you phrase as well, plus other information. Do you have any idea how much more money you can make once you really master these language patterns? Do you believe how much more popular and charismatic you'll be once you learn these language patterns? Do you realize that despite how powerful these language patterns are, very few people know about them, which gives you an incredible advantage? Do you truly understand the massive success you'll achieve simply by practicing these patterns on a daily basis? Our next pattern is called extended quotes. This pattern, extended quotes, is great to capture a large portion of your listener's brain. Basically, it works like this. You start telling a story and introduce a person within that story. Not stories like fairy tale stories, but stories that start off with, the other day I was walking my dog, and the basic formula is to start a story, introduce a character, and then that character introduces another story. And then within that second story, you introduce another character, and that character starts another story. And so eventually nobody really can remember exactly who is saying what, which allows you to pretty much say anything you want directly to your target. You just keep going until you get to a particular story that's roughly on the same theme of the idea you'd like to persuade your listener of. For example, if I wanted to persuade you that exercise is the best way to lose weight, I might say something like this. A couple of weeks ago, I was out for my morning walk when I ran into one of my neighbors. She seemed to have lost a lot of weight, so I asked her how she did it. She said she joined a gym with a friend and they would go work out every day together. She introduced her to her personal trainer, whom they both shared. And he was telling them that most people found that the easiest way to lose weight was through simple daily exercise. And that's what she was doing when I saw her. And apparently it works pretty good because she looks really well. The lack of referential index pattern works fantastic here. You can pepper your extended quote story with a lot of pronouns that your listener will have to do some guessing to figure out who they refer to. And of course, this will burn up a lot of your listener's brain processor, so they'll have to pay close attention to what you are saying. It's a great way to grab and hold people's attention for a long period of time. The more interesting you can make your stories and your characters, the better. Here's another example. The idea that I want to persuade you of is that dollar cost averaging is the best way to make money in the stock market. Once I knew this guy that was really, really rich. We belonged to the same Toastmasters club that I would go to every Thursday night. It was pretty cool, but it was also pretty scary sometimes, because it was in this big bookshop that was connected to a large coffee shop. And the place we gave our speeches was in the area where all the people would sit and drink coffee. We never knew what kind of audience we were going to get. But I always wanted to ask this guy how he made his millions, and finally I got up the courage to ask him one night. He said that when he was a kid, he was always poor and he had to work a couple of jobs during high school just to help his family out. He vowed never to be poor when he grew up. It turns out his father lived and struggled through the Great Depression and had some pretty limiting beliefs when it came to money, so understandably it took him a while to shake those off. One of the things he did that he said really helped him was to study the financial markets until he knew them like the back of his hand. He took seminar after seminar and he would meet all these guys that had all these ideas on how to make money in the markets. Once he met this guy that did pretty well and asked him how he became such a successful operator. He gave him this book, which was printed about 100 years ago, but it contained some great ideas. One of the things he learned was about dollar cost averaging, which is when you simply buy a stock or an index with the same amount of money every month regardless of the price. That's what taught him what he later realized was the simplest way to make a lot of money in the stock market, dollar cost averaging, which has turned many people into millionaires over the years and continues to do so regardless of the market conditions. Now that story is very long, very convoluted, and there's a lot of pronouns with very unclear references, all leading up to the idea of dollar cost averaging being the best way to make money in the stock market. If you want to have some fun at parties, run a bunch of these patterns by your friends and watch them slip into a trance right then and there. Even if you don't have a particular outcome in mind, This will keep them entertained and on their feet. The trick is to stay congruent. Don't pause and give your listeners time to catch up. Just keep going and expect them to follow you. They will. By the way, I was reading this article in the paper the other day, and the author was saying how when he was a kid, he always wanted to be a writer, and he listened to this radio show on how to do that, and it recommended that the best way to always improve yourself is to read different things by different people. And when he told his father that, his father mentioned that listening to this particular tutorial on a daily basis is a great way to do just that, so you can learn how to get all those things you want. Our next pattern is called selection restriction. Here's a great way to virtually guarantee that people will pay attention to you when you are speaking, as it effectively drowns out any stray thoughts that may pop up into their minds. Basically, this is a violation of well-formed English as understood by native speakers. It doesn't actually break any grammatical rules, so it makes sense. It just sounds kind of strange, even though the underlying meaning is clear. It's an excellent way to sparse up an otherwise dull sentence. What you do is give something or somebody an attribute that is not normally associated with that thing or person, and then use that imaginary attribute to get your point across. For example, what attributes does a chair have? The material it's constructed from, the color, the size, the price, the store where you bought it. Whenever you give a chair an attribute not in that list, people will have to pause briefly and check to make sure they understand what you're saying. This pausing and checking will only take half a second or less and will be done internally, although you will see an interesting look on their face. So it will get rid of all those stray thoughts people usually have while listening to people speak. So if you break your chair, the normal way to express your anger or frustration is to say, "I'm angry at my chair," or some may say, "I'm angry at my stupid chair," which is a well-used example as chairs cannot have intelligence. Some other ways to say it are, "My chair is upset with me because I broke it." "My chair is angry with me because I abused it." "My chair is depressed because it failed me and I have to buy a better one." This still gets the message across, but it will give your listener a bit of pause to make sure they understand what you are saying, and it will make your speech a lot more interesting. Here are some other examples. Instead of saying, "Look over there," say, "Hey, throw your eyes over there." Instead of saying, "I'm hungry," you can say, "My stomach is lonely." Instead of saying, "I'm thirsty," say, "I need to water my throat." Instead of saying, "We're late," you can say, "The clock is telling us to leave." Instead of saying, "Think about this," you can say, "Rest your mind on this." Instead of saying, "She's beautiful," you can say, "Her face hijacked my attention." Instead of saying, "That was delicious," you can say, "That made my mouth very happy." Instead of saying, "I don't know," you can say, "My brain is on strike." Another way you can use these is use sense words, see, feel, touch, hear, taste, in ways they aren't normally used. That idea doesn't smell right. I need to listen to my thoughts and see if I get an answer. I need to touch base with my memories and see if I can come up with something. This sounds delicious. A good way to practice these is to simply listen to other people talk, and while they are talking, take some of their statements and reword them using the selection restriction violation to make them sound more interesting and hypnotic. After a while, you'll be able to think of them yourself while you are speaking, and you will become a much more interesting conversationalist than you already are. I am George Hutton. Thank you for listening to the Mind Persuasion Podcast. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.